mediocre, but we have the opportunity to play like gods for the next half of football. But we can't be afraid to lose. There's no room for fear in this game.
This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
You can't stand the way this place is, take yourself to higher places.
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
I don't want them to gain another yard.
You blitz all night. If they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
Back to pass, throwing it downfield. And the ball's intercepted by Jackson King. He's going to run in for a touchdown.
And Mark Thaler.
Even in an all-star game, you have to limit your turnovers because especially with this talent on the field, they're going to cash in. You have to protect the football.
Take yourself to higher places.
Good morning to you. Another edition of the New Hampshire High School Football Show right here on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave. Pete Terrier along with Mark Thaler. I think football season is officially underway. I mean, I know we've been doing this show for 4 or 5 weeks, but last night a little bit of nip in the air. Of course, this morning when you get up, it's a little chilly, and great football around the state of New Hampshire last night, and we'll go all over the state. As a matter of fact, Mark, yourself out there in Keene last night. Don't know if you took Coach Lupa up on that dinner invitation after the game. He probably wasn't feeling too hospitable after what went down with Bedford and Keene. We'll get into that as the course of the show goes on. We will talk with the quarterback of the Bedford Bulldogs. James Caparel will join us about 15 minutes from now. Later in the show, we got Bill Raycraft from Wyndham coming on. His team, big matchup in Division 4 last night against St. Thomas, a rematch of the D5 championship game from last year. And then Roger Brown was on the scene in Hampton last night. Another outstanding football game. Exeter and Winnicott. We'll talk about all those games and more. But first, let's go to the scoreboard from Friday night. Brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and the Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults it's against the law to provide alcohol to minors. Here's Mark.
All right, Pete, happy first day of fall as well. Now it's really officially.
I forgot about that.
Really officially.
Is that why there's a nip in the air?
Yeah, could be, but it definitely feels like football season now. 16 games on the Week 4 Friday night slate, starting in Division 1. Number 1 Exeter goes down, the upset to number 3 and fierce rival Winnicott. Final score 27-24. Ben Franzoso started the game, 17 carries, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns, according to Roger Brown, who I can't wait to talk to him in just a little bit to talk about that game. Ben had 3 touchdown runs all in the first half, runs of 76, 2, and 77 yards. Tyler Grant for Exeter, 19 carries and 99 yards and a touchdown. Manchester Central, 13-10 winners over Nashua North. That was a close one, and Manchester Memorial back in the win column with a 33-25 win over Londonderry. Jared Umbadi with 5 rushing touchdowns, 293 yards. He had all but 1 extra point, so he had a big game for the Crusaders. In Division 2, the game I was at last night, number 8 Bedford with what I call a big boy win. The biggest in the program, according to Kurt Hines, the head coach. The Bulldogs knocked off Keene 25-24. James Caparel, 21 of 30 passing for 331 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He also ran for 63 yards on 11 carries and a score. 394 yards of offense from the quarterback position for Caparel. Huge game for him. Spalding with a 34-6 win over Merrimack, and Manchester West with a win over Timberlane, 43-40. Zach Ziemba takes the offense on a drive with 5 minutes left in the game. Blue Knights trailing. He leads them all the way into the end zone with 5 minutes left in that drive. He ends up capping it with a 1-yard touchdown and the 2-point conversion. Again, a 3-point win for the Blue Knights, 43-40. In Division 3, Milford with a 41-6 win over Conval, and Alvern with a 35-14 win over Merrimack Valley. In Division 4, Plymouth continues to roll, 34-12 win over Hanover. Brandon Goodale with 3 touchdowns. Trinity back in the win column after last week's loss at Plymouth. Last night, 56-6 winners over Laconia. 5 Pioneers with touchdowns. Brian Carey had 3 of them. Romeo Masuko with 2 of them. John Stark with a 28-0 win over Kingswood. Carson Dunn, 3 rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown. And Wyndham, 51-16 winners over St. Thomas Aquinas. Both of those teams last year played in the Division 5 final. Now they're up in Division 4. In Division 5, Kearsarge, 48, Interlakes Moltenboro, 14, and Stevens continues to win, 20-7 over Bow. Billy Brooks with all 3 touchdowns for the Cardinals. 2 more games in Division 6. Campbell with a 49-7 win over Bishop Brady. Josiah Wade, 15 carries, 189 yards, 5 touchdowns. He also had a 43-yard punt return for a score. And Newfound, 34, Raymond, 14.
Well, looking at the games coming up later on today, big ones. Real big one, I think, in Division 1. Nashua South at Concord. Perhaps the winner of that game has a solid shot at the playoffs in D1. Trying to figure out who that 4th best team is in D1. This game this afternoon in Concord at Memorial Field might go a long way in determining that. You got BG at Dover, another big one. That one's coming up tonight. Stello Stadium in Nashua, D2 battle. Souhegan at Hollis Brookline. Goffstown at Pembroke. Those are the D3 games. D4 Kennett at Lebanon. D5 Somersworth, Monadnock. That's a game that a lot of people are interested in. That's a 6:30 game tonight out there at Swansea Center. You got Epping Newmarket taking on Sanborn tonight at 7. Division 6 Winnisquam at Guilford, Battle of the Lakes. And then you got Newport at Mascoma. And then Farmington Newt takes on Franklin this afternoon at 3. As I said, we will talk with James Caparell from Bedford coming up in our next segment about 5 minutes from now. But I want to start with the game. I mean, we make a lot of jokes about driving out to Keene and the road trip and this, that, and the other thing. But you went out there for the Union Leader story, also on NewHampshireGameDay.com. What was your experience like outside of the issues that you might have had to fight on Route 101 there and back?
That was really the only issue. I was telling you and John off camera, off the air as well. It was just that I felt like I was behind every slow driver on 101. And there's not really many opportunities to pass. But let's save that for another time. The game itself was a fantastic game. I reserve the saying big boy win for really just super big wins for certain teams. And Bedford got what I feel is its first big boy win since becoming a varsity program. Up in Division 2, we can't forget that. This is their first go-around since jumping from Division 3. Making that bus trip, that can be overrated at times, but still, it was a 90-minute ride for me. So there's some time there to travel. Going to Keene, not easy place to play, especially, Keene number 4 in the power poll, and 2 great quarterbacks going at it, and James Caparell was really the story last night. He was sensational. And he had his playmakers were sensational as well, and I'm sure he will be the first to tell us that when he comes on the air. They have so many weapons in that offense, particularly the passing game, but you can't forget Dylan York either out of the backfield. He catches passes, he also runs the football. Canoni as well, David Canoni with some key runs as well for the Bulldogs. Just a total team effort. Offensive line was outstanding. That was the chief concern for the Bulldogs coming into the season when they lost Will McInerney at left tackle. They protected Caparell brilliantly last night. I mean, he was. They had to take on 2 guys from Keene's defense that I was particularly impressed with, but they really managed to do the job. For the most part, and they overcame 3 deficits on the road, and won a huge game. Big boy win. Big boy win, Pete.
Another big boy win. Let's go 2 hours west on 101, east to Hampton. And this is the game of the night, in my opinion. A lot of awesome games last night, down to the wire, a lot of action. But Winnicott at home against their fierce rival Exeter, and they win a whale of a football game 27-24. Now, I know when you're at one game, it makes it kind of difficult to follow other games, but the power of Twitter, I know you're a big proponent of Twitter, and I've kind of taken to it, I guess is the best way. And I was not able to go to any games last night, but I had my phone out and I was following the action on Twitter, and there was just a lot of stuff happening. But that game in Hampton was a tremendous game, won by Winnicott 27-24. What was going through your mind when you're covering a huge game, Bedford and Keene, and you're still very much interested in that Winnicott Exeter game?
Yeah, I was just trying to follow as much as I could while paying attention to the game I was at, because I didn't want to miss plays where I was keeping stats. That's certainly part of the job at each of these games. But very impressive. No question about it. I said on these airwaves, I believe last week was the first time I said it, and then I reiterated it on Twitter during the week. Winnicott had everything to gain in this game Friday night because, as far as I'm concerned, they're the number one team in New Hampshire right now. They did what the two teams in Division I that are expected to contend with Exeter could not do, and that's beat Exeter. I'm talking about Pinkerton and Central. So Central plays today. I mean, not Central. Pinkerton plays today against Salem. That's another big rivalry game. But as far as I'm concerned, it's Winnicott that's going to leapfrog. And now, obviously, I'm only one of 8 voters, and everybody has their own opinion.
I'm another one,
and you're another one,
and I'm voting for Winnicott.
Absolutely, I don't see how you can't. They did what the 2 other teams in Division I that are Exeter rivals couldn't do, and that's beat the Blue Hawks. So huge win. Just great night. This is so far this season best week of football so far.
Certainly.
And we still have, like you were saying, Saturday games that are big games as well. So there's a lot to be charged up about.
Yeah, I'm very charged up about it. We will talk about that Winnicott Exeter game in depth. Roger Brown, our friend from the New Hampshire Union Leader, also the outstanding website, nhfootballreport.com. Roger will join us 7:35 this morning. We'll talk all about that Winnicott Exeter game, and we'll take a quick time out right now. Come back. We'll get James Caparell from Bedford, the QB. Big win, a big boy win, as Mark Thaler calls it. Kurt Hines, the coach, says biggest win in our program history. I would have to agree. We'll talk to the Bedford QB1, James Caparell, when we return. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. You get us on the radio. You get us on the website. John Kesty from nhsportspage.com in the house shooting the video of us. And we got Jen Wells producing this morning. It's going to be a great show. You're listening to it on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, big night in the town of Keene, the city of Keene. It is a city out there on the border of Vermont, and what a football game we saw last night. Bedford goes into Keene 25-24. Exciting back and forth game. Here to talk about it with us on the New Hampshire High School Football Show, James Caparell, the quarterback of the Bedford Bulldogs. James, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. How's everything going?
It's going very well. I wonder how much sleep you got last night, because you go out there and play your biggest game, I would have to say, in your high school football career. You get the win. It's a road trip. It's a long ride back. I bet you it was a raucous bus, and then you didn't probably get too much sleep last night, did you?
Yeah, it was a rough bus ride, but we like those long bus rides. Listening to our music just gets us pumped up on the way there, and yeah, we had a good time on the way back, so it flew by. We were all excited and just flew by the bus ride back.
James, you sound like you're ready to play another game right now, like you're charged up. You could do it.
Yeah, I just took a shower, had to wake up a little. I wasn't sounding like this a half hour ago.
What's it like, James, as a quarterback, kind of holding on and saying, this is about the defense here. You guys gotta make that stand at the end. You got the interception that kind of sealed the deal for you, but kind of watching that take place and relying on your teammates to do their jobs has to be kind of nerve-wracking, isn't it?
Oh, no doubt. It was definitely nerve-wracking those last 5 or 6 minutes, but so the whole time I knew our defense could step up big. Coach St. Ons, our defensive coordinator, always seems to call the right plays in the right time, and our defense just was ready to go, and they had some good stops on those last couple minutes, so everything worked out well.
James, in the conversations I've had with you so far this year, you've always been really good about plugging the play of your offensive line. I imagine you'll do it again. And just tell us a little bit about the game that they played in front of you, particularly because, you were extremely well protected last night, and that's saying something considering Keene has Alex Parento, a thumper linebacker, and Jimmy Heaney, who was tremendous on both of the edges last night as a defensive end, and you were really well protected. So go ahead and plug your offensive line.
Yeah, they definitely have Keene has a good 7-8 man front line with linebackers and defensive linemen. And first of all, we have many dangerous athletes on the slot position, receiver, running back. So when our offensive line gives us 4 or 5 seconds to work with our plays, and great things are going to happen like last night. But the question coming into the season was the offensive line. They're young. We graduated a lot. Big Will McInerney's out for the season, but this year I can't believe how much they've stepped up. It's shocking. It's crazy. They're one of the best offensive lines in the state, and I'm blessed to have them.
That's the voice of James Caparell, the Bedford quarterback. Bulldogs, big win last night out in Keene, 25-24. Caparell throwing for 331 yards, 3 touchdowns. You also ran the ball, James, 11 times for 63 yards. When we had Coach Hines on a couple of weeks ago after that Winnacunnet loss, I asked him about the temptation that he has for letting you run the ball a little bit more, because everybody knows how good of a pocket passer you are, the presence that you have in the pocket, the gun of an arm that you have. But not a lot of people talk about the legs of James Caparell. Do you like it when you get a chance to run the football a bunch of times in a game?
Yeah, I love it. I like to get the chance to lower my shoulder. I don't get to do that too often in practice, so when I get the chance, I always like to do that.
James, tell us, were you aware, or how much did you pay attention maybe to the hype coming into this game? It was certainly billed as a QB duel between you and Lucas Lupa from Keene, 2 of the top quarterbacks in the state, obviously both in Division II. How much did you pay attention to that storyline in the days leading up to last night's game?
It definitely crossed my mind a few times. Gave me a little more extra motivation to push myself through the week. But really, as long as we came out with a win last night, I was happy. Whether I played a good game, bad game, however Lucas did, that didn't really affect me. As long as we came out with a win last night, I was happy.
So you didn't feel pressure to kind of counterpunch, back and forth in last night's game based on what he was doing, because he had a couple of really long touchdown runs, 56 and 45 yarders.
Yeah, no, he's a great dual threat quarterback. When he's running out of the pocket right there, he's probably one of the best run pass dual threat quarterbacks. But no, that didn't really affect me, as long as we all did our jobs, and I was just focused on getting the offense ready, because I had faith in our defense. They'd just come up with big stops at the end like they did.
James Caparell, our guest on the New Hampshire High School Football Show. You can catch us each and every Saturday morning live on the radio, 7 to 9 a.m., WGIR AM 610 in the Manchester area, where James Caparell and the Bedford Bulldogs are. Also have a Seacoast signal for you, 96.7 The Wave. That's 96.7 FM. And, James, you can watch us on the internet, nhsportspage.com. We actually filmed the show, posted up on nhsportspage.com, so you can hear how you sound, see how we look when we're interviewing you on the radio. A lot of fun with that. I want to go back to that Winnacunnet game. I'm sure you know by now that Winnacunnet knocked off Exeter, probably going to be the #1 team. I mean, obviously, they're going to be the #1 team when the new power poll comes out, the Union Leader WGIR, WMUR power poll on Monday. Let's go back to that loss against Winnacunnet. I was at the game. It was a slugfest, but there weren't a lot of points scored, 13-6. They really stymied your offense. You weren't really able to get on track. What do you remember from that game, and what do you think you guys need to do to correct what went wrong in that game so you could beat them if you do have to play them down the line?
Well, first of all, of course, we had a lot of penalties, stupid mistakes, offsides, holding, and that we had 10 or 12, I believe, so that got a hold of us. And then just overall, I made some dumb mistakes. I'll take credit for that. I made some very wrong decisions. Just as an offense, we just weren't really quick. The defense did a great job as usual, and we haven't really watched that film. Or we've watched the film, but we haven't game planned for them yet, because we still got the rest of the season. But I'm sure we'll see them in the playoffs again, and we're going to go back to that film and see what we can do differently.
Did you feel like you were in the zone last night, James?
Yeah, I don't know. I felt, since warm-ups, I felt it was just one of those days. I felt like it was going to be a good day, and luckily the offensive line, when they have a good day, and most of the time we have a good day, because we have so many dangerous athletes, like I said earlier, that can get open, and it's just, yeah, that's just about it.
James, I know, high school kids, especially star quarterbacks, you got a pretty good social calendar, I'm sure. Lots of friends. On a Saturday night, you'd probably want to go out and have some fun, but something tells me that you might be taking a trip to Nashua tonight. You got Dover at BG. Is that a plan? Or a bunch of the guys going to Stello Stadium to check out your next week's opponent, the Bishop Girton Cardinals?
I wish. If I'm home in time, me and my receiver, Brian Collins, are actually going down to URI for the day to watch their game. So if we're home in time, we'll definitely be there.
James, tell us a little bit about the receivers that you throw to consistently, and certainly last night. And I'll just read off a few stats before you get to answer. Obviously, top target, Brian Collins is a wide receiver. Last night, 6 receptions for 150 yards. You also have Nick Valis, 5 receptions, 79 yards. Michael Valis, 5 receptions for 56 yards. And Dylan York, 3 receptions for 38 yards. Those were the 4 primary receivers. There were 2 other guys, Jonathan Hoagland and Aaron Palace, who caught passes. But those the first 4 guys were your primary receivers last night. Tell me a little bit about throwing to them and their ability to get open for you.
Yeah, they're all different types of receivers. Obviously, Brian's the big deep threat who they always have to respect. They're always double teaming him, and when I read their defense and see single coverage, I'm going to him every time. He has great hands. He gets open all the time, so that's Brian. Nick and Mike, they're slot backs. They all the over the middle. They got all those quick outs, and just to keep the defense honest, they're both very similar players. They're actually cousins. And Dylan York out of the backfield helps a lot. When I'm stuck in trouble, I can always rely on him to hit on a swing pass, get 10, 15, 20 yards, and that's always a good thing to keep in mind while dropping back.
Yeah, I don't want to say Dylan York is underrated, but in a sense, to me anyway, almost a little bit overshadowed by the other 3 guys, the Valis, Cousins, and Collins. I mean, I've seen Dylan play a few times now. I went to high school with his oldest brother, Travis, so know the family well. But Dylan, very underrated coming out of the backfield. I mean, when you have to check down or when you're in trouble, he seems to always be there, and it doesn't take him long to hit high gear once he has the ball.
Yeah, I believe he's an all-state track runner. He's one of the fastest in the state. I don't think many people know about him. They're always game planning for Brian and the Valises because they believe we're only a passing team, but they don't, which is good. They don't know about Dylan, so when he comes in, we just hit him on a few swings, and then they have to start respecting him, and it just opens the whole field up.
James, you talked about the trip with Brian down to URI today. What other colleges are talking to you? Because you can definitely play at the next level.
Yeah, I'm speaking with a few right now, about some 1AAs, 2s, 3s. I'm kind of keeping my options open to see what falls through, but I'm talking to schools like URI, UNH, Marist, the University of Albany, Bentley, Stonehill, and a few Division IIIs also.
Well, we wish you the best of luck on that trip down to URI today, and best of luck in the D2 season. I guess Bedford does belong in D2 after all, huh?
Yes, that's what we're hoping for. We will.
All right, James, thanks so much for getting up early and talking to us, and congratulations on the win last night.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's James Caparel, QB1 of the Bedford Bulldogs. Kid doesn't like to talk, does he? I mean, not many high school kids.
He's tremendous.
You're going to get him up at 7 o'clock in the morning after, a late night, I'm sure,
right.
After a road trip to Keene where you had a huge win, and then come on, this kid could be sitting in one of these chairs hosting the show.
Probably could. Maybe we'll have him on next week. No, my guess is he's probably heading over to a Saturday morning practice and film session, weightlifting, that stuff. But yeah, no question. We got a seat here. He could come in.
All right. Well, we got a phone line open though for Roger Brown from NHFootballReport.com from one outstanding game on one side of the state, Keene and Bedford, all the way across Route 101 to Hampton, where Winnicott and Exeter locked horns. We'll talk with Roger Brown. He was at that game last night. He joins us next on the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Know their high school football. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show with Pete Terrier and Mark Thaler on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, certainly another guy who knows his high school football is Roger Brown from NHFootballReport.com and the New Hampshire Union Leader. He was on the Seacoast last night for that big matchup, number 1 versus number 3, Exeter against Winnicott. What do you know? Winnicott knocks them off 27-24. Roger, good morning. How are you?
Very good, Pete. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I mean, I would have been doing a lot better if I would have been able to be at that game last night instead of being elsewhere doing a NASCAR promo. It was a lot of fun, but I was following the Twitter feed, and man, what a back and forth affair that was in the first half, and big play after big play. What was the atmosphere like? Because I watched the highlights on Channel 9, Jamie Staten's Friday Night Football Report, and it looked electric there, Roger.
Yeah, they had, a couple of the Winnicott administrators who have been there for, 15, 20 years said it was probably the biggest crowd they've ever had at a Winnicott home game. I don't know what the number was, 3,000, maybe slightly less, maybe even a little more. People were ringing the field. You can feel it when those two teams meet. It's, like you said, you can feel it in the air. There's some sort of electricity there, and the players certainly didn't disappoint those who showed up.
Roger, what do you attribute such a big crowd to? Possibly the biggest ever. I mean, this rivalry goes back almost 80 years. Certainly a very, very long time. So, at least in recent memory, to have a crowd that might be considered the biggest, what do you attribute that to?
Well, probably a lot of it has to do with the fact that both teams were, look like they're going to have outstanding years. Both were unbeaten coming in. But regardless of that, even if it's a winless Winnicott team against a winless Exeter team, the towns being so close together, they always draw a good crowd. But the fact that we have two teams probably each going to vie for a state championship just added to that and brought more people out would be my guess.
Roger Brown from NHFootballReport.com and the New Hampshire Union Leader here talking with us on the phone about the exciting Winnicott 27-24 victory over Exeter last night in Hampton. Roger, last week, Mark scolded us, myself and other people, for talking about Player of the Year stuff, and it's
Don't
too
do
early.
it, Roger.
I'm not asking you to do it, but what I'm saying is we were talking Tyler Grant for obvious reasons, but we forgot to mention Ben Franzoso, who maybe heard some of that chatter and said, hey, don't forget to include me in that conversation. What a game for him. 219 yards, 3 touchdowns, big plays all over the field by him. Talk about what he did last night against an Exeter defense that has been really, really good this year.
Yeah, he was outstanding. He had 2 big runs, I think a 76-yard touchdown run and a 77-yarder in the first half, which is really I thought was one of the keys for Winnicott going in. They were going to have to come up with some big plays. They did have a couple of sustained long scoring drives, but when you beat Exeter, you can't make mistakes. You can say that against pretty much every team, but really against Exeter, it's magnified because they're not going to do anything to hurt themselves. And you need to come up with some big plays, whether it's turnovers or, like Ben provided, long runs with his speed. And they got 2 of them in the first half or first quarter, and gave that momentum that they just never really relinquished. I mean, it was a back and forth game, but you never felt like Winnicott had its head down or anything like that. So he also got hurt. He played most of the second half with a groin injury. I was talking to him after the game, and he was limping pretty good. So they had to go away from him quite a bit in the second half. But still, he had over 200 yards rushing, and he provided the offensive spark that they needed, no question.
Roger, what was the feeling did you get from the Exeter crew, or at least on their sideline after the loss, especially coming off of last week's blow the doors off Manchester Central 49-0 win?
Well, I just think it was similar to their Pinkerton loss last year. I think a lot of the same mistakes. So these off tackle plays that the secondary didn't come up and make tackles. They turned into long touchdown runs. So I don't know if this is something that's just early in the season and Exeter's defense isn't quite where it needs to be, but that's what it reminded me of when Emmett Smith and Kevin Davies were, chugging for 60, 70, and 80-yard TD runs over in Exeter last year. Exeter didn't play a bad game. They missed a field goal, which had they made it earlier would have ended up being a tie game, obviously. Just didn't quite play as sound defensively as Exeter teams in the past that I've seen. But But, it could have went either way. It was a great game, and, it wasn't like Exeter handed it to them and made it easy, that's for sure.
And they were both trying, right, Roger? There was no let's sit the starters mentality in this one. That they were playing for real, despite the fact that the game didn't count in the standings.
That appeared to be the case, Pete, yes. They were definitely playing for real, and I should just add that I don't want to hear anything from Rodafont about how he can't compete in Division I next year after this. That has to be put to rest.
I saw the tweet by Frank Coppola from your former paper there on the Seacoast, and he said just that. Look, there was a lot of, I don't know if that was like retweeted by you or from you or whatever, but I chuckled when I saw that.
Yeah, he proved last night, they can definitely play with the big boys. Certainly this team can, for sure.
Roger, when I talked to Ron earlier in the week, asking him for some keys to the game last night now, he said that limiting big plays for Exeter certainly at the top of the list. He obviously mentioned Tyler Grant. Can you just give your grade of how the defense, Winnicott's defense played last night? How would you grade that group?
Well, I'd have to give them probably in the B range. Maybe B+ considering it's Exeter because, Exeter did move the ball pretty much at will in the first half. They had 3 long touchdown drives. They didn't punt all night. I think it's the second game in a row where Exeter hasn't punted, or either team for that matter, I believe. But what they did in the second half was make stops when they needed to. Exeter had 3 possessions in the second half, I believe. They got a field goal on one. And then they were at midfield at the other 2 possessions, and Winnicott just kind of toughened up and wasn't going to let them get any further. So, I'd say B+. They're certainly a big physical unit, and considering who they were playing, they performed well.
Yeah, talking about physical, that Winnicott offensive line, especially the right side. Jordan Cutting, 6'2", 280-pound right guard. You got Christian Dyer, 6'4", 280 on the right of him. Those 2 guys are dominating players. And Ronaldo Gordon is a guy that stuck out for me. I saw them play at Bedford a few weeks ago, and he is a force coming off the ball, wreaking havoc in the backfield against the quarterback of the opposition. I guess they put him in the offensive formation, sort of like a jumbo formation, and they handed him a couple of balls last week. Did they do any of that last night against Exeter?
Yeah, he was in the backfield for a few plays. Didn't get any carries, but I don't think you'd want him coming at you as a defensive player for sure. It looked like they were using him pretty much once they get inside the 10-yard line for a few plays. Their jumbo set, and it was effective. And the right side of the line, as you mentioned, Pete, is tremendous. But last night, much of their damage, particularly the long runs by Francoso, were done off tackle to the left side or option plays to the left side. So they got some pretty good players on that side of the ball as well.
Yeah, I noticed that against Bedford too. They have the beef on the right side of that offensive line, but they run left with Franzo. So I don't know if they're so dominating that they could take out the right side and part of the left side of the line at the same time. But I noticed that about them when I saw them a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and Coach Ball mentioned after the game that they do just enough on offense to keep you honest in all areas. Some option game. They did that power eye with Ronaldo in the backfield. The quarterback can run a little bit, and their passing game was excellent last night, particularly in the first half. Didn't throw a lot. I think Wiesner was like 5 of 6 or something like that. But they made key throws when they had to downfield. So they look pretty good all the way around on offense. They're a handful for any defense, no question.
Roger, of all the Exeter Winnicott games that you've covered in your reporting career, where does last night's rank?
Oh, it's probably, I've seen some good ones.
Yeah.
So we'd have to put it, top 5. I mean, it was an excellent game, but I've seen, championship games between those 2 and playoff games. But for a regular season game that didn't mean anything, it sure was entertaining, and it sure did seem like it meant a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, let's look at it from the Exeter side of things for a second. This is, I think, kind of brings them back down to earth a little bit. They were getting all the hype and the hoopla. I come out, make the statement, kiss of death. Sorry, Billy Ball. No one's going to touch these guys the rest of the way is what I wrote last week on nhsportspage.com. And what do you know? They lose the first time they go out after I write that. But this is still a very, very good football team. I think we saw last night and we saw it last week against Central what Colby Swain means to this offense. Just a lightning fast back out of the backfield, can catch passes, can run that sweep play around the left side. A nice compliment to Tyler Grant and the other running backs that those guys have.
Yeah, Swain had a big game last night. He caught a touchdown pass, and that's another thing Exeter did last night was show people that they can throw the ball if needed. And they weren't throwing it out of desperation when they were behind. It was a lot in the first half. And it's not like they played bad. I told people, if you don't understand this rivalry, you just don't get it, that either team is going to win regardless of record or could win. So even if Winnicott came in with, as 1-2 or something like that, I wouldn't have been, shocked if they had pulled off a victory. But, it was two very good football teams going at it last night, and, play here or play there, and either team could have won for sure.
So, Roger, I'm looking at Winnicott's schedule. Next 2 weeks, it's Dover, and then Spalding. I'll ask you to kind of go back through your mental Rolodex again. Can you recall a time where Winnicott has played its 3 Seacoast area / rival teams in 3 consecutive weeks? It'll be Exeter, Dover, and Spalding in a row. Yeah,
probably not. Especially now that Spalding is somewhat better. For years they've just been hate to say it, but an automatic W on the schedule for Winnicott. Should provide a little bit more of a test this year. And Winnicott Dover is always a very good matchup as well. I was actually going to wonder about Exeter, if had they won last night, how they would mentally be going into next week's game against Concord, coming off, Pinkerton Central and then a rival game. But I'm guessing their focus will be fine now, because of the loss last night.
Roger Brown, he wrote for Seacoast online back in the day, now with the Union Leader, NH Union Leader, and the New Hampshire Sunday News, his outstanding website, NewHampshireFootballReport.com. That's NHFootballReport.com. Roger, what's on the schedule for you today?
I'm going to watch some college football today, Pete.
He's ready for some college football. All right. Not heading up NASCAR. I mean, I'm going up there after the show. You're more than welcome. I know Mark has already turned me down. How about you, Roger? You in?
Back in the day, I spent a lot of time up there. I think I served my tour of duty there, and I'm going to pass.
Good call.
All right, Roger. Well, we really appreciate you coming on the program, and we'll see you out at the field real soon.
Okay, guys. Thanks. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you, Roger Brown. Can I get any takers? Jen Wells, come on. No, not you. No. I know you got a husband who's a huge NASCAR fan, John Cassidy. I'm not even going to ask him. He knows nothing about racing. He wants no interest whatsoever. I bet you there's a lot of high school football people that are maybe coaches giving them the day off and saying, "Hey, go on up to Loudon, enjoy the action up there. Should be a lot of fun."
I don't know about that.
We'll take a quick timeout, come back, wrap up the first hour of the show. Not a bad first couple of guests here. James Caparel from Bedford talking about that exciting Bedford-Keene game, and then Roger Brown talking about Winnicott and Exeter. More to come in the next hour. Billy Raycraft, head coach of the Wyndham Jaguars, will join us. They made a statement last night in Division 4 that, hey, just because we moved up from D5 last year doesn't mean we can't hang with you guys. They are undefeated and looking good. We'll talk to Bill Raycraft a little bit later on in the 8 o'clock hour. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show. WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Heading up towards the top of the hour, 8 o'clock here on the New Hampshire High School Football Show. I am Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler of the New Hampshire Union Leader, New Hampshire Sunday News, and NewHampshireGameDay.com. John Kesty from NHSportsPage.com is in the house, filming the show as he always does, and it'll be posted up on NHSportsPage.com later on in the day. I want to just go around quickly around the state and talk about some of the games that we haven't really focused on so far. We've talked a lot about the Winnicott-Exeter game, the Warriors winning it 27-24. They are no doubt the number one team in the state when the new Union Leader WGIR, WMUR power poll comes out on Monday. Well, I say that now, but you got to imagine the rest of the voters. We've already publicly said that we're voting for Winnicott.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with the other voters. The game you were at, Bedford and Keene, a nail-biter, 25-24. Bedford wins it over Keene. Central last night, not overly impressive. They got the job done. They got the W. They beat Nashua North 13-10. I don't think you've seen Nashua North play, nor have I. We've both seen Central play a couple of times. What does that final score tell you, not having been at the game last night?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by that, actually. I know that North, for a while, before the game got away from them last week against Pinkerton, I believe that was close for a while too, right? So,
yeah.
So they're able to hang with some of the teams that are the so-called contenders this year in Division I. So impressive from Nashua North's standpoint, even though it's a loss, and I'm sure they're not pleased with that. But I think I am certainly more surprised with the final score, the margin of victory for Central. I expected that one to be more on the lopsided side, and the fact that it's not. That final score, actually, to be honest, Pete, is more alarming to me than last week's 49-0 win. Because I've said many times already, starting on the show last week and then throughout this past week, I thought last week's game just got away from Central. It was just a snowball effect. So I almost it's a win, and I don't take it away from Exeter, but I almost throw it out in a sense for Central because I just think it got away. This one's a little more alarming because I thought that they would be able to handle the Titans far more easily than the final score difference of a field goal suggests.
Central has Memorial next week. That game is at Memorial. Then they got South coming up, Londonderry. They play that schedule-only game against D3 Sauhegan on October 19th. The big one against Pinkerton on October 27th. And then they finish up against Salem. I mentioned Memorial. They had a high-scoring affair at Londonderry last night. Jared Umbati running all over the place, ran for just under 300 yards in the game. 33-25, Memorial wins it over Londonderry.
Yeah, and when I talked to Peter Colcourt in the preseason, the concern for the Crusaders was younger guys or inexperienced guys at the skill position. They lost a number of the names that we had come to know the last couple of years to graduation. So a new cast, that will really be the heavy lifters for that team, and Jared Umbati is certainly one of them. That's a tremendous game to have almost 300 rushing yards.
Let's stick in the city of Manchester. Manchester West, they're 2-2, Mark. You got to be proud of the old school. They beat Timberlane last night, 43-40. Did you have the over in that one last night?
I did not. No, I didn't. I'm laughing at that score only because I think back to when West beat Merrimack Valley in the first week of the season. I called Jim Lauzon the next day for some stuff for the newspaper, and as soon as he picked up the phone, he started to laugh, and he said, "My players told me not to talk to you because they were a little PO'd that I picked Merrimack Valley to win that Week 1 game in the Union Leader." So if I end up giving Coach a call again, I wonder what the reaction will be. It seems like I call him after these wins, and I'm sure the players maybe use the lack of respect as motivation, which is good.
Spalding 34-6 against Merrimack. Only got a couple of seconds to go on this, but two things that I think we can say. Spalding is decent. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. Merrimack is just very, very bad right now.
They're hurting. They're certainly hurting. They had a young crew last year. It's still they're still trying to gain experience, so it seems. They haven't been able to put points on the board. I think their final scores have been pretty low. So in terms of the production they've been able to put on the scoreboard, and that would be concerning to me as a Merrimack fan.
Well, Bill Raycraft used to coach Merrimack back in the day. His son, Bill Raycraft, coaches Wyndham. We'll talk to him in the next hour coming up. New Hampshire High School Football Show continues after 8.
Here in this game.
This is the New Hampshire High School Football Show.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
You can't stand the way this place is. Take yourself to higher places.
The New Hampshire High School Football Show is brought to you by New Hampshire State Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement.
I don't want them to gain
another yard.
You blitz all night. And if they cross the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take every last one of you out.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier
Back to pass, throwing it downfield. And the ball's intercepted by Jackson King. He's going to run in for a touchdown.
and Mark Thaler.
Even in an all-star game, you have to limit your turnovers because especially with this talent on the field, they're going to cash in. You have to protect the football.
Yourself to higher places.
Hour number 2 of the program, the New Hampshire High School Football Show. We do it live on the radio, 7 to 9 a.m. each and every Saturday during the New Hampshire High School football season on 2 fine stations in the Granite State, WGIR AM 610 around Manchester. Seacoast people, we got a station for you too. You can actually start getting it if you're on 101, probably about in the area of Candia, Raymond. You get the 96.7, the Wave signal comes in loud and clear, pumps out all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. We also do the program on iHeartRadio. You can get it live. Just go to iHeartRadio and do a search of either WGIR or 96.7 The Wave, and you can find it and listen to us. And we don't want to rely on people getting up early on Saturday morning to catch the show. So that's why we have John Kesty from NHSportsPage.com in here filming the program. Man, it's fun to look at us early in the morning on a Saturday. And I did not shower again today, so that's 2 weeks in a row. But we haven't gotten any complaints from the FCC or anything like that yet. So
We're in good shape.
Check us out on NHSportsPage.com. Great guests so far. James Caparell from Bedford, the quarterback who led his team to victory in Keene last night, joined us. We will play some of the cuts from that interview coming up a few minutes from now. We also had Roger Brown talking about the Winnicott-Exeter game last night in Hampton. Bill Raycraft, the head coach of the Wyndham Jaguars, will join us. His team in action last night against D4 rivals St. Thomas. But before we get into all that, let's go back to the scoreboard from last night. Brought to you by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission's Division of Enforcement and the Buyers Beware program, reminding all adults it's against the law to provide alcohol to minors. Do not do it. Here's Mark with all the scores.
All right, Pete, we will start with number 1 Exeter going down to fierce rival Winnicott last night in Hampton. 27-24 was the final. Ben Franzoso, 17 carries, 217 yards, 3 touchdowns. Those touchdown runs all in the first half, and they went for 76, 2, and 77 yards. Tyler Grant in the loss, 19 carries, 99 yards, and a touchdown. In other action in Division I, Manchester Central with a 13-10 squeaker win over Nashua North, and Manchester Memorial with a 33-25 win over Londonderry. Memorial's Jared Ambati, 5 rushing touchdowns, 293 yards. He had all but 1 extra point as well, so he had a huge game for the Crusaders. In Division II, the talk was of James Caparell, Bedford quarterback, who led the Bulldogs to a 25-24 win at Keene. Caparell, 394 yards of offense. The breakdown, 21 of 30 passing for 331 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also ran 11 times for 63 yards and a score. Spalding on the board with a win, 34-6 over Merrimack. And Manchester West with a comeback win at Timberlane, against Timberlane, 43-40. Zach Ziemba took the offense on a final drive, game-winning touchdown. Drive went for 80 yards. He scored from 1 yard out, also added the 2-point conversion. Again, that final, 43-40 over the Owls. In Division III, Milford 41, Conval 6, and Alvern with a 34-14 win over Merrimack Valley. 4 games in Division IV last night. We'll start with Plymouth. The Bobcats won against Hanover 34-12. Brandon Goodale with 3 touchdowns. Trinity back in the win column after losing to Plymouth last week. The Pioneers 56-6 win over Laconia. 5 Pioneers with touchdowns. Brian Carey with 3 of them. Romeo Masuko with 2 of them. John Stark 28-0 over Kingswood. Carson Dunn with 3 rushing touchdowns and a passing score. And Wyndham with a big win over St. Thomas Aquinas 51-6. Those teams both entered the game undefeated. That was the blackout cancer game as well for Wyndham. So I'm curious to see how that went when we talk to Coach Raycraft in just a bit. A few more scores. Division 5, Kearsarge 48-14 over Interlakes Moltenboro, and Stevens with a 20-7 win over Bow. Billy Brooks with all 3 touchdowns for the Stevens Cardinals. Division 6 scores. Campbell 49-7 over Bishop Brady. Josiah Wade 15 carries, 189 yards, 5 touchdowns. He also added a punt return touchdown that went for 43 yards. And Newfound with a 34-14 win over Raymond.
Just looking at some of the scores of note last night, you mentioned the Trinity 56-6 win at Laconia. As I was following last night on Twitter, and I actually sent out a tweet. You can follow me at Pete Terrier. That is, my last name is Tarrier. And I saw the score at halftime: Trinity 50, Laconia nothing. Yikes!
Yeah.
Yikes!
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Burns was on with us last week prior to his team going up to Plymouth and losing that game. They bounced back. Laconia is a team that a lot of people thought was going to be good this year. Man, they're having a terrible year. I don't know what the deal is with them. Trinity, they showed that they are not the dominant team in D4. Maybe that's Wyndham. Maybe it's Plymouth. Let's go back to last week in that game. You were there.
Yep.
What did you see in that game about Plymouth that they dominated so much against Trinity?
I saw a whole heck of a lot of Kyle Reiser, the 6'4", 195-pound defensive end. He was tremendous, and he caused all kinds of problems for Trinity's offensive line. They lined him up on both edges. He blocked a punt early in the game. It didn't lead to points because Plymouth didn't cash in on that big play. But Reiser was in Trinity's offensive backfield all afternoon, and look, Plymouth it's a physical team. They pound the football much like Trinity does down this way. You know, I know folks don't get to see Plymouth as much down here in the Manchester area, but they haven't lost anything. I mean, they reload, and it's all about coaching consistency. I've said it for years now, and when you have a guy in his 42nd year at the helm, that certainly helps, and his assistant coaches have all been with him for decades. I'm talking about Chuck Lenahan. That's an impressive Plymouth team, and it'll be an interesting matchup next week because Plymouth hosts Wyndham, and those are a couple of unbeatens now. And look, Trinity by no means is out of the mix. I wouldn't, and I'm not suggesting that you're writing them off either, Pete. That was a convincing win for Plymouth. They had a lot to play for in that game as well. A couple of the players and Chuck Lenahan admitted to me after the game they were well aware of the 0-3 record that Plymouth had against Trinity in the short time of this rivalry. They were well aware of it, and they were also still probably steaming from losing two of those games last year, including the state championship game in which they got thumped. So they had a lot to play for in Plymouth last weekend.
Well, despite all the glowing accolades and praise that you just heaped upon the Bobcats, I noticed they didn't quite make it onto your power poll ballot last week.
You're not surprised by that, are you?
I'm not surprised. I had them at 10th on my ballot. They did not make the poll. Sauhegan got in there at number 10 as Trinity was bounced out of the power poll, and I had Trinity off my ballot last week and Plymouth in there at number 10. What's it going to take? A win over Wyndham next week to get them in your top 10?
I mean, that could do it. I mean, again, this is the point in the season where I start to come down from just Division 1 and 2 teams. Once those upper, the larger schools have started to knock each other off, that opens the door for Division 3 teams, and you work your way on down the line. At least on my ballot, I thought last week, or this, the week 4 poll that is almost finished now, I thought it was way too soon to have Trinity or any other Division 4 team on the ballot or on the.
I had Trinity
poll.
9th last week.
I mean, and certainly to each his own, and everybody has their own voting philosophy. For me personally, going 3 weeks of the season being finished when we submitted last week's ballots was way too early for a Division 4 team of any kind to be on the ballot of the top teams. I think maybe after next week, depending on the result of that Wyndham-Plymouth game, maybe you'd see a Division 4 team in there.
This might be tough for you to do right now, but I'm going to ask you anyways. We both came out and said that Winnicott is the new number 1, no matter what happens the rest of the day today throughout the state. They beat Exeter last night 27-24. No, the game didn't count in the standings, but it was played for real. Both teams wanted to win, did everything they could in order to win, and Winnicott came out on top by a field goal. They're going to be the number 1 team on both my and your ballots next week, and probably everybody else. We can't speak for them.
Right. I hope so.
I know Kelly Brown. He is a Winnicott grad, so I know he's going to vote them number 1. But what do you do with Exeter? How far do you drop them down? They beat Pinkerton. Pinkerton, they're going to play Salem today. That's a 2:00 game. You got to expect Pinkerton's going to roll in that one. Where does Exeter fall to? Do they fall all the way down to number 3 and Pinkerton moves up despite the fact that they lost head-to-head, or is it Winnicott, Exeter, Pinkerton?
That's a great question. I was thinking about the same thing last night driving home from Keene, and then again this morning driving into the studio.
See, we put some thought into these votes. No, we really do.
No, it's a great question. We're on the same page. I don't know how I will vote yet. I mean, typically, typically for me, if you lose, only in the rarest of exceptions, only in the rarest of times, I should say, do you not get penalized on my ballot, at least somewhat, for losing. I mean, if Pinkerton wins today, Exeter lost last night. If Pinkerton wins today, I know the head-to-head certainly is a factor as well, but if we're going on a week-to-week basis in voting, there has to be some penalty for Exeter losing. And does that mean that Pinkerton also gets penalized in victory? You know, this is what makes the power poll great, is that there's this discussion, this debate about what's more important, the actual head-to-head win that happened, you know, in week 2, or where we are right now going into week 5.
Now, the other part of it is, with Bedford's big win against Keene last night, Keene was 4th in the power poll. I had him 4th on my ballot. You probably had him in that neighborhood.
I had him 3.
All right, so you had him 3rd.
Yep.
I don't know where you had Bedford. I had Bedford 8th. Where did you have them?
I'd have to look it up. They were on my ballot, I think, low 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. Well, I'll look it up for you.
What effect does that 1-point win by Bedford have on the ballot? I mean, do they flip-flop positions? Does Keene drop down to number 8, 7, whatever, and Bedford move up to number 3 or 4?
Well, I think Bedford has something to gain from last night's win. That was, like I said, big boy win, and just because it was a 1-point win, in many respects, is more impressive than a blowout win, because they trailed 3 times in that game and had to come up with a big defensive stand in the end to seal it. So the fact that it was just a 1-point win is almost irrelevant to me. That was a big win for them last night. So they have something to gain. Again, it'll depend on how some of these other teams do today. You know, Nashua South has a big game against Concord. How that one turns out might affect where teams are placed on my ballot anyway.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that next. I mean, that's a matchup of teams that whoever loses that game could be completely out of the power poll. Nashua South was in a tie for 6th place with Central on the power poll last week, and Concord was at number 9. I had South at 6th, and I had Concord at 9, so I was right there with the rest of the voters. But I'm not so sure if I'm going to drop. If Concord was to lose that game, they'll probably drop out of the power poll ballot, or at least off mine. I don't know if South will fall off completely if they lose the game.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't fall off completely. Here, I just looked things up for you, Pete. I voted Bedford 7 for this current poll. So they are 8 in the poll, but on my ballot they were 7. I voted Nashua South 8. I did not have Concord on my ballot. If South loses, again, to me, a big drop in the poll is 2 to 3 spots. So South is on the verge of being knocked out on my ballot anyway if they lose today.
I was just looking at the others receiving votes, and we had talked about Plymouth. Plymouth received 6 votes. So I had them in 10th on my ballot, and some other voters obviously thought that they belonged in the top 10 as well. So you're basically keeping Plymouth out of the power poll. Mark Thaler.
Right.
Send the emails.
Right, exactly, yes.
mthaler@unionleader.com.
Right, or hit me up on Twitter, right? No, exactly. Again, yeah, it's too early for a team in Division 4 to appear on my ballot. It could be coming soon, though, as it typically does. It's usually once you get to the week 5, 6, the midway point of the season, things start to see some of those teams crack my ballot.
Crazy to say, on September 22nd today, my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Gil Terrier. That it's midway through the season.
I know. It goes by fast, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. All right, so is the show. The show goes by very, very fast. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to replay some of the clips from the James Caparell interview. The Bedford quarterback joined us bright and early this morning, 7:20. We'll play back some of that, talk a little bit about that game that you were at, Keene and Bedford last night, talk about the Winnicott game, the win against Exeter last night. Later on in the hour, Bill Raycraft, the head coach of the Wyndham Jaguars, will join us talking about that big win against St. Thomas last night at Wyndham. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
The slot position, receiver, running back. So when our offensive line gives us 4 or 5 seconds to work with our plays, and great things are going to happen like last night.
That is the voice of Bedford quarterback James Caparell after his team's exciting 25-24 road win last night in Division II at Keene. Caparell was a guest on the New Hampshire High School Football Show this morning. He told us during the show that he's headed down with his wide receiver, his favorite wide receiver, Brian Collins. They're going down to URI to check out the football game down there on a recruiting visit. Caparell, Mark, you were at the game. very, very impressive last night. No big surprise, but the numbers, you totaled them up. 331 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Also ran the ball 11 times for 63 yards and a touchdown. And Caparell says, "I like it when Coach Hines calls my number."
Yeah, he had a great run there too. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was looking for number 2. Sorry, I juked you guys both out.
I know it.
I like to get the chance to lower my shoulder. I don't get to do that too often in practice, so when I get the chance, I always like to do that.
This is a kid who, the team that he plays for is the Bulldogs. Mm-hmm. That's a Bulldog type of quarterback. He's different. You've seen all you got a chance to see Lucas Lupa in person last night. What would you say the comparison between those two guys?
I'd almost say no comparison, really. They're, to me, 2 totally different styles, again, based on one game. But James Caparell is your pocket passer type quarterback. He can run the ball, and he showed he can certainly last night. But first and foremost, he's going to stand back there, and he's going to throw the football. He was in the shotgun the majority of last night and just picking the defense apart. Lucas Lupa runs the option for Keene. So his biggest threat was running the football, and he was very good at doing that. Very patient behind the line, waiting for holes to open up, and when they didn't, he pitched the ball at times. But by and large, he was running the football. So very different styles. In a sense, Lucas Lupa, to me, reminded me of Andy Velas, former Bishop Girton quarterback, now starring at UNH. In that sense, Andy was a run-first quarterback for Bishop Girton. Very fast, great vision, and he was able to use his legs to gain a lot of yards.
Would you compare Caparell to Riley Cody? I know he's bigger than Cody and probably a better runner than Cody, but passing-wise, will those guys be similar?
I would put them in the same category, absolutely. Big right arms for both of those guys, and they will stand back there and throw the ball. I would agree. I think that James is probably a little bit better on the run. Again, he showed it last night, but they're the similar style. They'll stand back there and they'll throw the ball.
Let's get your impressions on Keene, a team that you had ranked number 3 on your Power Poll ballot. A team that doesn't get a lot of coverage around here because of where they're located in the state. Is that the first drive you've made to Keene?
No, I've been there before, but on the point you're making about the amount of coverage they get, quick funny story. I walked into where people pay to enter into the field, and the nice ticket lady said, "We don't get. It must be a big game. We don't get a lot of press here." So I think even they were aware that it was a special night in Keene with 2 of the top 8 teams in the state going at it.
Did they say, "What's this union leader you speak of"?
Yeah, right.
Never heard of it.
If they did, it wasn't to my face, but who knows? But when I left, they might have turned to each other and said that.
Were there any radio announcers making schneid comments about
no,
you?
No, not last
week in Exeter.
Not that I saw, no, or heard. No.
So your impressions on Keene after seeing that game, were they all that you expected? Not quite what you expected? Where would you kind of, grade them out?
I'd probably give them, good question. I'd probably give them in the B range last night. Very athletic. In the past, Keene teams have been big and strong, and they've really used their muscle to push you around. This year's team is a little smaller. I think I've said it on the show before, Pete. In a sense, like past Bishop Girton teams, where speed really was the number one thing for the BG teams that won championships under Tony Johnson, certainly. So this Keene team is faster than past Keene teams. I'm not comparing this Keene team by any means to the BG teams, just in the sense that I think speed is their number one thing, certainly with Lupa at quarterback running the football. But again, and as I wrote on New Hampshire Game Day, I was very impressed with 2 of their defensive players, Jimmy Heaney as a defensive end and Alex Parento as a linebacker, and he also carried the football on offense. But those guys are big, fast, athletic playmakers on defense. And, in a 1-point game, a play here or there, and Keene wins it. So they lived up to the number 3 spot that I put them in on my ballot, and they certainly lived up to their number 4 ranking. It was a very good game.
The other team in the game that we've been focusing on is that Winnicott-Exeter game. Winnicott wins it 27-24. A wild game. First half ended in a 21-21 tie. The scoring calmed down. After that, Ben Franzoso just running all over the place in the first half. As Roger Brown told us, though, he had a groin injury and was really limited in the second half and was limping around quite a bit. Taking it back to our conversation with James Caparell from Bedford this morning, the only loss that the Bulldogs have had came in Bedford a few weeks ago, week 2 of the season, against Winnicott. It was a 13-6 win, but it was really 13-0. Bedford scored their only points of the game on a play that was ran after a penalty on Winnicott when the clock had expired, so they had one more play, and Caparell ended up throwing a touchdown pass to Mike Vallis with no time left on the clock. But it was really a shutout. We asked James Caparell what happened in that Winnicott game and what went wrong, and here's what he had to say.
We had a lot of penalties, stupid mistakes, offsides, holding, and that we had 10 or 12, I believe, so that got a hold of us. And then just overall, I made some dumb mistakes. I'll take credit for that. I made some very wrong decisions. Just as an offense, we just weren't really quick. The defense did a great job as usual, and we haven't really watched that film. Or we've watched the film, but we haven't game planned for them yet because we still got the rest of the season. But I'm sure we'll see them in the playoffs again, and we're going to go back to that film and see what we can do differently.
That's a great quote to play leading into this point. Bedford had to overcome on one of its late drives 2 penalties that it committed against Keene. Keene was driving. I'll have to look it up in a minute here on my game sheets, Pete. But Keene was driving second half, I think to take the lead, but I'll double check again. They had a roughing the kicker penalty on a punt that extended Bedford did that extended Keene's drive, and then later on in the drive committed another key penalty as Bedford was going in. I want to say it was on the drive where Bedford might have taken the lead, so penalties are still seem like they should be a concern for Bedford coaches, Bedford players, and the fans. It's something that they'll want to clean up because you can't get away with that too many times where you extend drives for other teams by making foolish penalties. But they overcame them last night, and that was a good sign from my point of view. They overcame adversity, being down 12-0 at the start of the seconds into the second quarter. They overcame penalties at the end. Again, 2 more reasons why it was a very impressive win. One
tough thing about Bedford is they've got so many weapons, and when Caparell can spread the football around to a bunch of different receivers, got a running back in Dylan York who can run the ball. They put the big guy, number 44, David Cannoni, out there for some carries. He's real tough to bring down. But Bedford's just got an array of weapons, and when you kind of factor in what Caparell can do with his feet in addition to his arms, they're just really tough to stop.
Brian's the big, deep threat who they always have to respect. They're always double teaming him, and when I read their defense and see single coverage, I'm going to him every time. He has great hands. He gets open all the time, so that's Brian. Nick and Mike, they're slot backs. They all the over the middle. They got all those quick outs, and just to keep the defense honest, they're both very similar players. They're actually cousins, and Dylan York out of the backfield helps a lot. When I'm stuck in trouble, I can always rely on him to hit on a swing pass, get 10, 15, 20 yards, and that's always a good thing to keep in mind while dropping back.
That's James Caparell, the outstanding Bedford quarterback, talking to us earlier this morning on the New Hampshire High School Football Show. What a game for him. 331 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 11 carries, 63 yards, and a score as Bedford wins it at Keene 25-24. We got to take a timeout, come back, get Bill Raycraft from Wyndham on the phone. They improved to 4-0 on the season in Division 4. They beat St. Thomas. A little payback for the team that beat them last year in the D5 championship game. We'll talk with Coach Raycraft when the New Hampshire High School Football Show continues on WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
Welcome back to the best local coverage of New Hampshire high school football on the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Well, welcome back to the program. We talk now with the head coach of the Wyndham Jaguars, who won the rematch game last night against St. Thomas, rematch of last year's D5 championship game. Bill Raycraft joins us on the phone. Coach Raycraft, good morning.
Thank you for having me.
My first question is to my co-host, Mark Thaler. Was that game a rematch? I know you wanted nothing to do with that Pinkerton-Exeter game as a rematch, but was last night's game a rematch, Mark?
How about I toss it to the coach? Coach, did you consider that game a rematch?
To be honest with you, we didn't even talk about that during the week. I think in the back of the mind, and in particular, the seniors who had to go through that, I'm sure they were thinking it. But we told them all week that this was the next step to where we want to be, and go out and play like it.
Well, Coach, before we get into some of the talk about the actual game, can you tell us a little bit about the blackout cancer event that you had last night for the game, really trying to tackle that cause or help tackle it? How did things go?
It went way beyond what we thought it was going to. We haven't got the final totals, and in fact, I'm going to head in now and start looking at some of that. But I think we're probably close to raising $3,000 last night.
Wow.
And
Did you say 3,000?
Yeah.
And the goal was 2,000, right?
The goal was 2,000. And the cheerleaders got involved, and credit to St. Thomas, they wanted to get involved and did their own whiteout version. But it was something that we planned a while back, and doing the alternative jerseys and raising money that way, and selling T-shirts in school, and it was phenomenal.
Those jerseys, though, I don't know that. I mean, maybe next year if you do the blackout cancer game again, those jerseys will come in handy. But black jerseys with neon green numbers on them, they were pretty ugly. But cancer is certainly an ugly disease.
It is, and working with American Cancer Society last year on a project we did, we determined that the neon green is actually a representative of all cancers. I think certain cancers get a priority look, and we wanted to make a statement that there's a lot out there, and we have to be aware of it and raise some funds for it.
So on to the game, Coach. You couldn't have asked for certainly a better outcome. Just what was the number one thing that Wyndham did well last night that propelled you to this win?
Our defense really stepped it up. They've been doing it all year, creating the turnovers and giving the offense an opportunity to, put points on the board. And I don't think they get, all the credit they deserve, but to be able to come out and play a complete game like that was pretty impressive.
Coach Bill Raycraft from the Wyndham Jaguars is our guest. His team impressive last night, 51-16 win at home against St. Thomas. The Saints' first loss in over a couple of years, actually, because they were the champs, undefeated last year in Division 5, beating your team in that D5 final. What would you say about your program now? What is this, year 4 as a varsity program or a football program since you guys opened up Wyndham School? What would you say about where you are right now, having moved up into Division 4 and taking the experience that you've had from past seasons and kind of putting it all together right here on September 22nd, 2012?
Sure. I said to somebody before, I don't know where we're going to end up this year. But I know we're going to fight every week. This is a very unique group of kids who these seniors started as JVs 4 years ago. So it's our third year varsity, and they've taken ownership of the program. So I just know that every week we're going to show up and give it our best effort. And the kids have really responded to everything that the coaches have asked of them.
Coach, when we had chatted earlier in the week, you had mentioned a couple of kind of X-Factor guys, maybe the guys that don't quite get the headlines that some of your stars do. You named a couple of X-Factor players that needed to play well. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on how they did play. Those players being, Ben, is it Petron or Petron? I want to make sure I get it right.
Petron.
Yeah. Okay, Ben Petron and Chris Ferry on your defense. How did they play last night for you?
They played very well. I think, we got some guys, Lorenz and Canoni, Clooney, and Alberico that get all the headlines. But there's some guys who stepped up, and Ben Petron was one of them. He was locked on to Ryan Manette last night and did a fantastic job. He's a kid that, although a senior this year, is really playing his first year of football because he got injured in the preseason the past 2 years. So it's sort of that X factor for us, not knowing exactly what we had in him. But he's a very strong defensive corner for us and comes up and makes the big hit. And then Chris Ferry came over from varsity soccer this year, probably the fastest kid in the school, and quickly earned a defensive starting position. And I'm going to say by mid-season he's going to begin some substantial offensive reps too.
That's Bill Raycraft from the Wyndham Jaguars, 51-16 winners last night against St. Thomas. Your team, Coach, now sitting atop the standings, actually tied with Plymouth in Division 4, both with 4-0 records. You get to play the Bobcats in the land of Lenahan next Saturday. Can you talk a little bit about that game?
I mean, it's really going to tell us where we are. The nice thing was playing Chuck, and the last time I beat Chuck, I think I was still in high school, but they exploit whatever your weakness is. So what we're going to look at is, what we can do against an incredibly well-coached team and very talented athletic team, and then look at what they're doing to try to slow us down or shake us up a little bit, because Chuck is very good about finding where you might be weak.
Did you, understanding all that you just said there, Coach, did you raise an eyebrow at the final score of the Plymouth Trinity game last week? Because coming into the season, I think most figured Trinity was the team to beat, and Plymouth had something to say about that last week.
I certainly did. Prior to that, I had been able to see some film on both teams and knew that both were very strong. But like I said, I mean, Plymouth is a very disciplined team, and if they can find an edge, and obviously they found that with Trinity, they're going to exploit that. And so, yeah, I was a little surprised.
Coach, the Wyndham-Salem situation where you guys used to send kids to Salem, you mentioned a couple of your guys, Danny Canoni and Joe Lorenz. Their brothers led Salem to a state championship about 4 years ago, if I remember correctly.
2009.
2009. Okay. What effect has that had, you guys having your own high school, on Salem? Jack Gaddy retired after last season. They're having a real tough year. Numbers are down. They're just not the same Salem football team that we've come to know and love and appreciate over the years. I was just hoping you could talk about the effects on Salem losing those Wyndham kids.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how much of an effect it is. When we were building the school, I had a chance to go over and coach with Jack during that season, and he and I would talk. And one thing he said, it wasn't necessarily the numbers that he was getting from Wyndham, but he did get some talent, and that was obviously evident in their final championship run. We've got, I'd say, probably 40% of our players have never played football before, so I think having a program in the school that's just ours, and that buzz around that, we've been able to get more kids out. Salem's going to be Salem. They'll be fine. They graduated some incredibly talented kids last year, so I think we knew it's going to be a learning curve for them, but given it's Salem, I'm sure the coaches will be working hard to get them back up there.
Coach Raycraft, I'm just curious, in building the Wyndham program, and it's certainly quickly on the rise, what did you take from your experience building the John Stark program? Because we go way back to my Goffstown News days when when John Stark was just an independent league team and then became varsity. Did you take any experiences from building that program and apply it to the current situation at Wyndham?
Absolutely. We learned what worked or what we felt worked, and then we certainly found what didn't work. And so some of those things we changed. We were able to have success early on at Stark, and so some of those things about the intensity and discipline and those sort of things we've carried over to Wyndham. And I got a great coaching staff that believes in what we're trying to do. It's just not, on the field, it's off as well. And, I think that's the difference. This field right now is, it's really more of a family atmosphere than it is, a dictatorship saying, this is what we're going to do, and let's do it.
Joe Raycraft, your dad, the longtime Merrimack coach, I assume you were on that staff with him at one point, were you?
I did help him out. Yep.
What do you?
And now he's helping me out. He's our lead scout, and gets to travel around the state checking out these teams for us.
Have you talked a little bit about what's happening with their program, because they were a power, and now they're just not very good?
Yeah, he and I haven't talked a lot about that. I know Joe over at Merrimack is a great coach, and I think he's doing the right things that is going to get that program going in the right direction. But they're in a meat grind for a division, and it's tough. So it's one of those things. I think it's a ebb and flow, and they're going to get their ship turned the right way.
Well, we saw you last night on TV. You were the intro of the Friday Night Football Report with Jamie Staten. Your little pregame speech when the team was huddled up, that was pretty cool. It was fun to watch. Did you know that they were filming that? Do they have to ask your permission, or they just sneak a camera in there and go with it?
I knew the camera was going to be there. When they started to mic me up, I was a little surprised. The kids like that. What I told them in the pregame before we went outside is, it's fun to be in the games that get all the hype, and certainly there was a buzz last night, being under the lights and the blackout game and everything else. But we want to be a program that wins the hype games, and treat it like that, have fun, but know there's a bigger purpose.
And Jamie Staten is saying Windham. I think he's a Windham resident now, but I grew up in Nashville, which is, right across 111, through Hudson, and I always knew it as Wyndham. You've been calling it Wyndham. Is there like a controversy in the town? Windham, Wyndham? What's the deal with that?
There is, and Jamie keeps bringing it up. It depends on who you talk to. It is, residents have been there for years. Are split. Some will call it Wyndham, some will call it Windham. Jamie likes to give us a hard time about it. I've been corrected by people on the way I say it, so I'm not sure there's a right way or a wrong way, but we're just happy, we're being mentioned.
All right, Coach. Well, we really appreciate it. We're going with Wyndham. All right.
Yeah, it's Wyndham here.
Damn you, Staten. We're going with Wyndham. It's been great having you on, Coach, and enjoy the trip up to the land of Lenahan next Saturday.
All right, thanks, guys, for all the coverage you do for high school sports. It's great.
All right, that's Bill Raycraft from Wyndham. The Jaguars are 4-0 and a team to be reckoned with in D4. Quick timeout, come back, wrap up the show, rapid fire around the state, talking about what happened last night, looking ahead to what's going to happen today. It is the New Hampshire High School Football Show, WGIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave.
You found the best place for local high school football talk. It's the New Hampshire High School Football Show on WGIR AM 610 and News Talk 96.7 The Wave.
Heading up towards the top of the hour, 9 o'clock, our final few minutes of the program. Pete Terrier, along with Mark Thaler, New Hampshire Union Leader, New Hampshire Sunday News. Mark, where are you headed today? We haven't even talked.
Yeah, I know. It's South Concord.
South Concord.
Well, South versus Concord, not South Concord.
No,
right?
I should, but it is in Concord.
Yeah, it is in Concord.
But it's not exactly the southern part of Concord.
I don't think so, no.
Is that Memorial Field?
It is.
Okay.
Another Memorial Field, yep.
Don't they have two? They have the baseball field Memorial Field.
It's a whole...
And then the football Memorial Field.
Yeah, football, track, baseball, softball, tennis courts, the whole shebang.
Who did you pick to win that game?
I picked South.
You did pick South. Yep. And you haven't seen South yet?
I have not seen South yet.
You have seen Concord?
I have seen Concord.
And why did you go with South?
Putting a lot of trust in their quarterback, Trevor Knight. I just big believer in, more than ever, I've had a number of high school coaches tell me that quarterbacks now are making more of a difference than ever in the high school game, which, I mean, you hear a lot about, you hear that remark at the NFL level or even major college football, but at least me, I haven't heard that. I can't recall hearing it as much in high school, but this year especially, I've heard it quite a bit. And so putting my trust and my faith in another very talented quarterback that he'll help South put some points on the board.
They got some weapons too.
Yep.
I mean, Stephen Schote is a good player. He's been making big plays for them. Pat Goff is a kid that we heard about last year a little bit. They did lose a lot, obviously, with Armand McCray and Derek Paradise going, but and Beeren was a force for them on the lines. But South has a pretty big pool to draw from. in Nashua. They've always had good programs. So I like South in that game as well. I have not seen either team play in person yet. And if I wasn't going to NASCAR, I'd be going up there. So you'll have that covered in the New Hampshire Sunday News tomorrow, also on NewHampshireGameDay.com. Interesting story by Kevin Gray, Gray Matter, on the front page of today's New Hampshire Union Leader. Dan Pasquale, the outstanding Central linebacker, big, huge green club on his hand. And Kevin writes that he looked like a Rock'em Sock'em robot. He's having surgery on his hand on Monday. But Ryan Ray and the training staff, they just tape this thing up like crazy. I mean, this is you got to check out the picture on the front page. It is this huge green club, basically, and they do that. You see it with linemen in the NFL, and they let them go out there and play one game, and you're probably like wailing people on the side of the head with that thing. That thing was pretty crazy looking.
Yeah, it'll be a tough blow for Central, particularly defensively. I mean, that's been their. I think we all agree that, or most people anyway, agree that the defense is probably the weakness for Central. So to lose a co-captain on that defense, it'll be tough. We'll see how Central responds. They'll either rally around losing the guy at least for quite a while. I think Kevin writes that he could be back toward the end of the season, or maybe Thanksgiving time. So that's really the end of the season. But in any event, they're not going to have him. At least for a few weeks, and we'll have to see how the Little Green respond. And
Little Green defense played pretty good last night, holding North to 10 points. I mean, North not an offensive juggernaut, but this kid Dimitri Jackson's been doing a heck of a job running the football for Jason Roby. Colby Gunter, the left-handed QB, has had a decent year so far. So to hold that team to 10 points, pretty impressive, especially when you had Pasquale less than 100%, obviously. Big story from last night, two of them really, but the big one, Winnicunnet's victory at Exeter, and of course Bedford's victory at Keene. About 30 seconds on that.
Yeah, both statement wins for the Warriors and the Bulldogs. We've talked a lot about it today, so it'll also be interesting to see how those teams continue to progress after these big wins in Week 4. A couple of quick shout-outs, too, if I can, Pete. Tony Johnson, we all know that name.
Right.
He kicks off his coaching debut with Worcester Academy tonight against Phillips Exeter Academy at 6 o'clock. And then also a shout-out to J.D. Dudek. It's a hockey note. I know we're the football show right now, but J.D. Dudek, former Pinkerton star, transferred to Kimball Union. 16 years old, junior at KUA. He verbally committed to Boston College men's ice hockey. So that's big news.
Go Eagles. It's a power program, not only in Hockey East, but in NCAA hockey. A tremendous show, as always. Want to thank James Caparell, the Bedford quarterback, for joining us in the first hour of the program. We also had Roger Brown from NHFootballReport.com and the New Hampshire Union Leader, and Bill Raycraft from Wyndham High School, who was our guest a few minutes ago. For Mark Thaler and John Kesty from NHSportsPage.com. Thanks to our producer, Jen Wells. I'm Pete Terrier. We'll talk to you next Saturday.